Today I am going to go on at some length about Kennedy's inaugural. Does everyone have a copy of that? Has anyone seen a film of his delivering this? Yeah? Impressions?
I mean, the accent is hard to ignore. It's has a very particular charm.
Kennedy, it was thought when Kennedy delivered speeches that he had a New England accent. He really didn't have a New England accent. He had a certain kind of family accent, which was, as I understand it, in part colored by his mother's upbringing in a convent, by certain elements of old Boston, and by a peculiar idiosyncrasy, in part also, of growing up abroad at times, when his father was ambassador to the court of St. James. So, yes.
Yeah, just kind of going on to that as far as just the voice goes. Every time you listen to a JFK speech, and this was no exception, you kind of immediately know who you're listening to without even needing to know like the author. So it was kind of I very much so appreciated just the distinguishment of that specific rhetorician.
Yes, he has a speaking style and an actual voice, which is identifiable. He also uses certain hand gesture repeatedly. It's almost like a chop, and if you ever saw Bill Clinton speak, Bill Clinton often tended to imitate Kennedy's hand gestures. We haven't talked too much about gestures in speaking in this course. They're important. They once were taught in a very elaborate way in the study of rhetoric. You were taught how to go like this, or how to go like this, or how to go like this. Well, you notice they're still used effectively today. Our current President Trump often goes like this, or like this. As long as you have a gesture that you are confident in, I would say use it. And it's better to use a gesture than to go on for quite some time without any hand gestures at all. You do not, however, want to be someone who is constantly waving hands while talking. You have no doubt occasionally seen this, where someone is talking perhaps in a seminar and they're always going like this. And after a while, it's very hard to pay attention to what they are saying because you are instead being mesmerized by the motions of their hands. So gestures like emphasis on a single word in a sentence should be used fairly sparingly. But I would practice gestures if you ever are going to do much public speaking. They are worthwhile. And you only need a couple. You don't need a whole panoply the way it used to be taught in rhetoric. They really did. I've seen diagrams of something like 20-some individual gestures. You know, famous ones like this, and others like this. Well, it's true. You look at these old films of Bob La Follette, the populist from Wisconsin in the early 20th century. Some other gestures that were used were like this. You know, driving a point home. Absolutely. Now, we've gotten away from that, probably for the better. For one thing, they don't play very well on television. So why would you use gestures that don't play well on television or video if that's the way you're going to be seen mostly? So pull out, please, Kennedy's inaugural address, either the text in our own words or the text in classical rhetoric for the modern student or something you printed out from the web. I must first, before we start, make an emendation to something I said in a previous class. I want to make sure to get it right. I said that Corbett said alliteration was in 3 or more words. Do you remember that? Well, Corbett actually says 2 or more. It's the analysis in Corbett that I ask you to read that says that alliteration is used sparingly. And I would deeply disagree with that. I agree with Corbett's definition, and I disagree with the analysis of alliteration in what I asked you to read. And as we go through this address, I will try to point out why I think this address is heavily alliterative. As Corbett tells you, originally, English, when it was Old English, was not, in its poetry, rhymed at all. It was divided into half lines, often of about 4 syllables each, and those half lines were held together by alliteration. Very often, 1 word in the first half line and 2 in the second, or 2 in each half line, or occasionally 2 and 1. And that's what would keep up both the rhythm and the sound of Old English verse. Not rhyme, not rhyme. Part of the reason is that English has a limited number of rhyme words for some words. What language is it easier to rhyme in? Chinese easier to rhyme in? French, yes, somewhat. German? Spanish, yes. What's a very easy language to rhyme in comparatively? Pig Latin. Thank you, Seth. Yes, that's true. What Southern European language is very easy to rhyme in aside from Spanish because of all the vowels? Italian, yes, Italian. And Italian develops all kinds of rhyme schemes, terza rima, ottava rima, many of which are adopted in English. But there are a number of words in English that are quite hard to rhyme. What do you rhyme astrolabe with? Babe? You have very limited choices with some English words. My point is this. The inner old structure of English based on Anglo-Saxon tends to favor alliteration as a way of balancing clauses and statements. And as your analysis tells you, in JFK's inaugural, one of the ways in which the speech is created stylistically is through antithesis and parallelism. And this fits in wonderfully well with phrases that are alliterative. Now, you can overdo it, but I think in this speech, it's not really overdone. So Kennedy gives this on a very cold, blindingly bright January day. He had asked Robert Frost to come and read at the inauguration. Frost was elderly at the time, and the light being so strong, he had trouble reading the text. And as I recall, and I'm recollecting this from my boyhood, and I may be wrong, Frost therefore instead recited rather than reading because he just couldn't read the text. It was too bright. Did you ever do that in very, very bright sunlight? And Frost came out and he just couldn't make it focus for his eyes. But Kennedy, hatless, which was new for an inaugurated president. Presidents before had always worn top hats of some kind at inauguration. Kennedy did not. Kennedy, hatless, delivered this. We observe today not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom. So what's going on in just that clause? Not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom. Yes, he is uniting everyone. First of all, you say we're not championing one particular party. We're celebrating freedom. In terms of style, what is going on? Not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom. Yeah, kind of antithesis. Antithesis and parallelism are pretty close. And here you could say a victory of party is somewhat antithetical to a celebration of freedom. Perhaps not a true opposite, but yes, there's parallelism in the structure. Symbolizing an end as well as a beginning. An end of what? Yeah, the election, the previous administration. He doesn't say it, but the previous administration was Republican. But so he wants part of the theme of this speech is that it is a new beginning. So this symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, signifying, now notice that, symbolizing and signifying renewal as well as change. So just look at that structure for a second. Symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, comma, signifying, and there's symbolizing and signifying renewal as well as change. So an end as well as a beginning, renewal. Renewal suggests what? Discontinuity or continuity of some kind. Continuity of some kind, yes. As well as change. For I have sworn before you and Almighty God, because he just took the oath of office, the same solemn oath. Now, listen to the S's there. We've had symbolizing, signifying. Now we have sworn and same and solemn. Our forebears prescribed nearly a century and 3/4 ago. And now there's another S sound in that sentence. before we get to the period. What is it? Century, yes. It's effectively another alliteration. You don't have to have the same letter to have a very close alliteration. So he says, "For I have sworn before you and Almighty God, the same solemn oath our forebears prescribed nearly a century and 3/4 ago." There's almost a little bit of an introduction and narratio there. As in so many presidential speeches, there is a casting back of a period of time. Lincoln will go back 77 years ago. Here, Kennedy is going to go back a century and 3/4 ago. Forebears. What are forebears?
People who came before us.
Yes. Now, why doesn't he use the word ancestors? You might say, wow, they're ancestors, right, Katie? Yeah, there's that. There's stylistic. So it fits in better, and it fits in later with F alliteration. What else?
It's just more precise.
It's more precise, yeah. Why might you want to avoid ancestors? Why?
Excludes people who weren't involved in the political process.
Well, yeah, that's part of it.
200 years ago.
And
They were not literally his ancestors.
well, they weren't literally his ancestors, but
It's a country of immigrants, so people's ancestors didn't necessarily establish
yeah,
the
a lot
United
of
States.
ancestors weren't around. It is a country of immigrants. So if you wanted to use ancestors here, the literal meaning of ancestor is someone who is related to you by blood. Not necessarily true with forebears. Can be, doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be. The world is very different now. That's a nice transition. We go from a century and 3/4 ago to the world is very different now. For man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. So it's a very simple sentence. The world is very different now, with is as the verb. For man holds in his mortal hands. That's a very interesting use of alliteration right there. Man and mortal, holds and hands and his. And then you also have the sound echoed, man and hands. And you say, oh, this doesn't make much difference. This is tiny details. Yes, it does make a difference. It makes a difference when you hear it. Makes a difference even when you read it, but especially when you hear it. For man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty. And there we have P's, bracketing that phrase there, and all forms of human life. So we have parallelism working there? We sure do. Do we have any kind of antithesis?
To abolish all forms of human poverty and then all forms of human life. All forms of human poverty is a very positive thing to happen.
Yes.
And all forms of human life is terrible.
Yes, that's right. What is he talking? He's talking about nuclear war. He's talking about a thermonuclear war, which is part of the background of this speech. The Nuclear Test Ban Treaty had not yet been signed. There was a furious arms race going on, both sides increasing their stockpiles of weapons, still testing them in the atmosphere constantly, beginning to develop new forms of delivery systems. So, for example, originally you just put one thermonuclear device on the tip of a missile. How many can you put on now? 10. You can put 10 nuclear warheads on the tip of one missile. They're called MIRVs, multiply independent reentry vehicles. They're a little hard to track once they all separate. They're a little hard to shoot down, no matter what kind of antiballistic missile system you have. Technology is amazing. You shoot one missile up and it has 10 warheads on it. And then at a certain point in space, they separate out and they head independently toward their targets. So when we think about the technology, I guess since we've been reducing arms, we have gone through an amnesia about not remembering how deadly, how fiendishly inventive these arms are, and still exist. So there's antithesis here, there's parallelism, there's a wonderful use of sound and alliteration, and yet the same revolutionary belief. So here now he's hearkening back to a century and 3/4 ago. The same revolutionary belief. for which our forebears fought is still at issue around the globe. And then in apposition, the belief that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. Generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. Once again, bracketed by here, G's. You know, you could do worse than simply imitate some of these sentences. I don't mean imitate the same words, but imitate the style, imitate the way in which the language is being used. We dare not forget today that we are the heirs. Now, heirs to what? Forebears. It's connected. It's all in a chain of that first revolution. So he's hearkening back to the very revolution that established the country. Let the word go forth. Now, in this speech, you'll notice the use of the word let fairly frequently. What's the advantage of using that kind of locution, let? Sometimes it's let us, sometimes it's just let the word go forth. Is it stronger or weaker than may the word go forth?
I think it's a bit stronger because it's actually actively asking someone, the audience, to do something.
Let the word go forth. May the word go forth is kind of hopeful, like, may you not do this, or may you do this. But let the word go forth. And it avoids also Kennedy or anyone delivering a speech doing what? Putting the first person in and saying, I will have the word go forth. Or, as president, I will let the word go forth. No, it avoids that. He uses the first person very tactically just a few times in this address, but not here. He used it when he says, I have sworn before you and Almighty God. He doesn't say, I have sworn an oath. He says, I have sworn before you. What's the importance of that, by the way?
He's saying that he has an obligation to the people?
Yeah. He has an obligation to them, and they are witnesses, as is, he says, Almighty God. So he says these rights come not from the generosity of the state. Now, generosity of the state sounds like a positive phrase, but it's not a positive phrase, is it? What does the generosity of the state here mean? It means the state is so powerful that they are going to be willing to let you have some rights. In other words, all the sovereignty is vested in the state, and you get your rights because the state says you can have them. But that's not the idea of the Constitution. Where are the rights vested? They're vested in the sovereignty of the people. And what are those rights? Well, as the Declaration of Independence says, those rights are natural rights. They're inalienable rights. At least that's the proposition, the belief. Let the word go forth. So we have first, we have forget, now we have forth. From this time and place to friend and foe alike. Now, friend and foe sets up what later in the speech? Is it a controlling pair of words for the speech? Yes.
It sets up the division of nuclear powers.
Yes, it sets that up later. First of all, there are differential kinds of friends, and we see that in some of the following paragraphs. Right, you all have very close friends, right? And then you have friends who are maybe acquaintances. And then you have friends who maybe are friends, but you're not sure. Right? True? You know? And then you have people who you know are not friends. And this is true of nations as well. So he first mentions friend and foe alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans. What does a torch symbolize? You see it often in emblems of schools. Knowledge, yes, very often knowledge. It symbolizes knowledge or enlightenment or some sort of light that is lighting a path in many ways. Sometimes it's a torch, sometimes it's a lamp. A torch sounds a little more vigorous than a lamp. You probably wouldn't want to use the word lamp because it might confuse it with something like, and you say, well, like an electric light or something. But no, a torch has been passed to a new generation, and one passes a torch. What is the example of passing a torch today? The Olympics, of course. That's where it's done. It isn't done many other places, but that is the old tradition that goes all the way back, hundreds if not thousands of years. You pass the torch to a new generation.